Welcome to True Echo, where forgotten voices rise, and real justice finds the spotlight. Today's story will leave you shaken, heartbroken, and deeply moved. It's the kind of tale that cuts through the noise, one of betrayal, cruelty, and a kind of love the world almost buried. But most of all, it's a story about rising. This is. Single mom and her son were beaten and cast out by her in-laws, until a millionaire saw them. Under the searing blaze of the American West, where the sun cracks the ground and time slows with every dry gust of wind, a mother lay clutching her unconscious child. Janelle Carter, a black single mother, and her 8-year-old son, Malik, had been discarded like refuse by the Whitmore family, the same family that once called her daughter-in-law. Now, she knelt in the dust outside their sprawling estate, bruised, dehydrated, her skin split by heat and humiliation. Beside her, a torn dress, an empty water bottle, and the boy who meant everything to her. From the grand windows of the mansion, Beatrice Whitmore watched with a glass of iced tea, her expression as cold as the cubes clinking in her glass. She didn't look away. She didn't care. Just behind her, Percy Langston, the family's advisor, whispered venomously, "That black woman was never one of us. She was just a stain Charles couldn't scrub out before he died." The iron gates slammed shut. The sun roared overhead. Janelle didn't scream. She didn't beg. She only held Malik closer as he slipped deeper into unconsciousness. "Please, baby, wake up," she whispered hoarsely. But the world kept driving past. No one stopped. Until he did. A silver-gray Ford F-150 rumbled to a halt beside them. Dust swirled. A man stepped out. Silas Whitmore, once the prodigal son of Western agriculture, now a reclusive millionaire with a burned past. He didn't ask questions. He didn't pretend to be a savior. He just placed a bottle of cold water at Janelle's feet and said, "If you need help, I have it. If not, I'll drive away." Janelle looked up with eyes that had been taught to distrust every kind gesture. In her life, white men didn't offer choices. They gave orders. But Silas was different. He didn't move toward her. He didn't touch her. He waited. And in that stillness, something ancient shifted. She nodded, only slightly, only enough. And that was enough for him. He laid out a clean blanket in the back seat, gently helped her lift Malik in, and drove. Not a word was spoken about race, class, or the sins of the past. Because they both knew, what she needed wasn't charity. It was dignity. At Red Mesa Farm, Silas's long-abandoned property, help waited in the form of Dr. Horace Avery, a veteran black medic with steady hands and a quiet, commanding heart. He examined Malik and diagnosed him with severe dehydration and fever. But he survived. Not because of luck, Horace said. But because his mother refused to let him go. That night, Janelle sat by Malik's side. She didn't cry. Her tears had dried years ago. But when Silas set a cup of tea beside her without a word, she looked up and saw something she hadn't in a long time. Safety. Not promises. Not pity. Just presence. She stared at the only photograph left in the living room, a woman with smoky gray eyes and a laughing child. Emily Whitmore and their daughter, Annie. Silas's wife and child, lost in a fire years ago due to delayed emergency response in a less important zip code. A black neighborhood. Forgotten by the system. That night, as wind rattled the windows and Malik finally slept without shivering, Janelle whispered the first real sentence she had spoken in days. "Thank you for seeing us." Silas didn't reply. He didn't need to. Because for the first time since the fire, he saw something alive in his home again. Not ghosts. But a future. The next morning, Malik opened his eyes. Janelle nearly collapsed from relief. His fingers gripped hers weakly, his voice cracking as he whispered, "Mom, are we home?" She smiled, brushing his hair back. "We're safe. But even safety has shadows. From the town's edge to the cafe counters, whispers began. Beatrice Whitmore hadn't let go. She didn't scream in the streets. She didn't rant online. Her power wasn't volume, it was influence. She visited the bakery where Janelle once bought cupcakes for Malik's birthdays. Just a warning, she told the owner, people are starting to talk. That woman's living on that man's farm. Imagine what the children might think. Soon, the once friendly town turned its face. At the pharmacy, the clerk refused to meet Janelle's gaze. At church, the priest hesitated before offering her communion. A sign appeared on a fence, protect our values. Stop immoral opportunists. But she stayed. Because Malik was healing. Because every morning, Silas left fresh bread on the kitchen counter. No words. No performance. Just bread. Just care. One afternoon, Silas returned from town with groceries. Janelle met him on the porch. You know they're calling me a gold digger, right? He didn't flinch. They called my wife a traitor for marrying a quiet farmer. Truth is, they just hate what they can't control. Janelle chuckled dryly. You're terrible at comfort. I know, he said, handing her a box of tea. But I'm not leaving. It wasn't romance. Not yet. But it was something deeper, trust in its earliest form. Far away in Chicago, investigative journalist Finn Morgan scrolled through a community thread when a comment caught his eye. Black woman using dead husband's family for land. The same story every time. Finn didn't usually chase gossip. But he'd seen this pattern before, when abuse hides behind reputations, and truth gets edited out of court records. So, he packed his notepad, camera, and a recorder and drove to Red Mesa. When Finn knocked on the farmhouse door, Janelle didn't flinch. She didn't ask why he came. She just handed him a chair and poured him lemonade. For over an hour, she spoke, not to perform, but to remember. I don't want sympathy, she said. Just someone to write what really happened before they erase it all. 3 days later, Finn uncovered the first thread of something bigger. Charles Whitmore's accident, the one that left Janelle a widow, wasn't as clean as reported. Speeding at 120 miles per hour. No skid marks. Bluetooth removed. Last call not to Janelle, but to Crystal Mooney, a woman now living in Dallas. Charles's mistress. A leaked audio file revealed Charles yelling during the call. I told you not to call me while I'm driving. I said I'll leave her, okay. Then a horn. Then silence. And Percy Langston had picked up the car just hours after the crash. Paid in cash. Replaced the electrical system. Recovered the Bluetooth. The whole narrative, the noble family preserving a legacy, was rotting from the inside. Finn knew he had enough for a story. But he wasn't finished yet. Because if truth was going to protect Janelle and Malik, it had to burn through every lie ever written about them. And somewhere, deep inside the courtrooms of Arizona, the Whitmore family was already preparing a counterattack. Beatrice Whitmore didn't need to scream. All she needed was paperwork. She filed a lawsuit for full legal custody of Malik Carter. The town buzzed. The woman who had once thrown Janelle out onto the scorched lawn now claimed Janelle was unfit, a poor, unemployed black mother, cohabiting without marriage with a man of different race and status. No one said it outright. But the undertone was deafening. Malik, the mixed-race child of a white legacy, didn't belong in the arms of the woman who gave him life. Janelle knew the trial would be brutal. She'd be alone. But Silas refused to let that happen. On the day of the hearing, the small Shady Valley courtroom brimmed with eyes. At one end, Beatrice, in a polished gray suit, her posture straight, her pearls gleaming like weapons. Percy Langston sat beside her, leaning on a silver cane, his face unreadable. On the other, Janelle, in a modest purple dress. She had no attorney. No PR team. Just Silas sitting quietly beside her like a fortress. No flash, no theatrics, just unwavering support. The prosecution's arguments came swift. Malik lacked a structured environment. His mother had no employment record. Her association with a reclusive landowner posed emotional risk to the child. Janelle stood when her turn came. Her voice was soft. I don't have wealth. I don't have a mansion. But I have something that woman never did, I never abandoned my child. She described carrying Malik through 104-degree heat. Watching his blood drip onto her arms. The courtroom held its breath. I didn't ask anyone to save me, she said. But no one had the right to try and take my son because they didn't approve of his skin. The judge listened. Then, quietly, Finn Morgan stood. He carried a thick binder of documents and a recorder. Your Honor, he said, I present new evidence showing the plaintiffs are not seeking custody for the child's well-being, but as a cover for fraud and property theft. He played the audio of Beatrice's voice. After that woman loses custody, we'll take back Red Mesa. I don't care if Silas lives with her. The land belongs to us. Gasps filled the room. He presented signed deeds forged under Charles Whitmore's name. He showed how Percy had used Charles's power of attorney, after his death, to mortgage land now worth over $30 million. The judge leaned back, stunned. At that moment, the courtroom door opened. 2 federal agents entered, walked to Percy Langston, and cuffed him without a word. Forgery. Asset manipulation. Federal fraud. Percy stammered. I didn't mean, Charles wanted. But no one was listening anymore. Beatrice's face turned pale. Her empire was crumbling, not from fire or scandal, but from truth finally given voice. The judge looked directly at Janelle. The court rules in favor of Janelle Carter. Full custody granted. Silas Whitmore is recognized as legal stepfather. No cheering. No applause. Just silence. A silence filled with respect. Malik rushed from the bench into his mother's arms. Then he hugged Silas. Now I have a dad, right? Silas knelt, placed a hand on Malik's shoulder, and said without hesitation. Never leaving, son. Behind them, Beatrice sat alone, her power dissolved, the Whitmore name no longer a weapon, but a wound. The ruling changed everything. And nothing. Janelle walked out of that courtroom not as a plaintiff, but as a mother officially recognized by the law. Silas stood beside her. Malik between them. But the world outside didn't suddenly embrace her. In the weeks that followed, subtle retaliation took shape. The women's group from church stopped calling. The pastor skipped her name during prayers. Small businesses began pulling away support. The town never needed to scream its racism. It just whispered her out of existence. Still, she stayed. She cooked breakfast every morning, braided Malik's hair, and wrote lesson plans for the children Silas began inviting to the ranch, kids like Malik, forgotten by public schools, written off by society. The barn was cleaned out. Polished. Rebuilt. And on the first day of informal classes, 23 children sat on repurposed benches while Janelle wrote on the chalkboard. Today, we learn to spell. But most importantly, we learn not to be ashamed. Malik sat in the front row, scribbling furiously in a torn notebook. His first story. The man who planted grass but grew a family. Each morning, laughter echoed through Sunrise Ranch. That's what they called it now, no longer Red Mesa. A new name for a place that had finally become a home. No ceremony, no speeches. Just Silas carving a wooden sign and Malik hammering it in with proud hands. One warm afternoon, Janelle stood by the old fireplace where Silas once displayed family photos. She placed a small frame beside the others. It was of Emily and Annie Whitmore, Silas's lost wife and daughter. She looked at the picture with soft reverence. I didn't come to erase her, she said quietly. I came to preserve what mattered. Silas stood beside her, silent. Then he opened a small box. A thin platinum ring. Inside, only 3 initials, J, S, M. I'm not asking for promises, he said. Just your presence. That's more than I ever had before. Janelle didn't cry. She simply nodded. Not because she needed a man to complete her story, but because this one hadn't tried to rewrite it. Later that spring, Malik knelt at Annie's grave with a bouquet of wildflowers. I promise, he whispered, I'll make Dad Silas smile like you used to. By the time they left the hillside cemetery, the wind felt different. Not softer, but freer. The years passed quietly, but not insignificantly. Sunrise Ranch bloomed. Not in roses or magnolias, but in letters, pencils, and children's voices. Janelle never sought the spotlight. She refused interviews and declined awards. But what she gave every child who walked through the barn doors was something more valuable than attention, a name, a story, and permission to believe they mattered. Among the kids, Ruby May, once too shy to speak, became the farm's youngest reader. Emmanuel, a boy expelled for slow comprehension, now taught younger kids how to write their names in cursive. Malik, at 10, became his mother's assistant, always ready with an extra chalk stick and a defiant smile. But even peace earns enemies. One morning, while Janelle helped Grace, her young daughter with Silas, practice vowels, a shadow fell across the fence. Beatrice Whitmore. No chauffeur. No pearls. Just an old woman with tired eyes and a spine still trying to stand tall. Janelle didn't rise. She didn't need to. This was her land now. Her space. Her voice. Beatrice stopped a few paces away. I didn't come to take anything, she said, her voice frayed by years of bitterness. I wanted to speak the truth. Once. Malik looked up, about to ask, who's that, Mom, but Janelle gently placed her hand over his. He understood. Beatrice's voice shook. I envied you. Not because of your skin. But because. Charles looked at you in a way he never looked at me. Even when he hated you, you still held his heart. I thought, if I erased you, maybe I could reclaim what was mine. Silence. Even the wind seemed to pause. Janelle didn't say, I forgive you. That wasn't the point. Forgiveness is never owed. It's earned. And sometimes, it simply arrives in silence. She gave a small nod. Not to absolve Beatrice, but to release herself from carrying any more of her poison. Beatrice bowed her head and walked away, not defeated, just irrelevant. Days later, a federal judge sentenced Percy Langston to 5 years for financial fraud and forgery. No one stood by him. His fall was as silent as the lies he once whispered behind locked estate doors. Even the townspeople, once loyal to his wealth, quietly erased his name from memory. But Janelle didn't rejoice. Neither did Silas. Some victories don't feel like triumph. They feel like breath, finally unburdened. That evening, Malik sat with Silas and Janelle on the porch. He handed her a bound booklet, his first completed short story, typed, edited, and printed. The Man Who Planted Grass But Grew a Family. As she turned the pages, her eyes misted. Not from sadness. From awe. Later that night, Malik, now a young man, sat at his desk under a dim lamp and penned a letter. Not to mail. Not to post online. But just to keep beside a photo of the woman who raised him with no wealth, no titles, just fierce, unwavering love. May 12th. My 28th birthday. Today, a student asked me if anyone ever doubted me because I'm black. I looked at him, Mom, and thought, they didn't just doubt me. They tried to erase you. But you stayed. You didn't raise me in a mansion, but in a home where truth was louder than prejudice. I stand in front of my students today because you never stopped believing in me, even when the world tried to bury us. I love you, Mom. Malik Carter Whitmore **. He placed the letter in a frame beside her photograph. Beneath it, he etched a single line. My mother didn't change the world. She changed one child. And that child never stopped. The 10th anniversary of Sunrise Ranch came without fanfare. No press. No stage. No speeches. Just the sun rising gently over white fences, the scent of lavender in the breeze, and the sound of children's feet pounding the dirt as they ran toward the repurposed classroom that once was a horse barn. Inside, Janelle sat quietly near the back, her knitting in hand. She didn't wear makeup. She didn't need applause. She had already earned something greater, peace. Across the yard, Malik, now grown and a respected teacher in the local district, stood in front of a microphone mounted on a crooked wooden pole. Beside him was his little sister, Grace, all curls and curiosity, holding onto the hem of his shirt. He looked out at the faces seated on folding chairs. Some of them were children he once taught to read. Others were now parents of the new generation. Ruby May, now in college studying herbal medicine. Emmanuel, about to start a job as a teaching assistant. Malik cleared his throat. There was once a man who thought he could only grow grass. But then, he nurtured something more. And there was once a woman, my mother, who never set out to lead, to fight, or to become the symbol of anything. She just refused to abandon her child. That's all. But sometimes, that's enough to rebuild the world. There were no violins. No camera crews. Just quiet applause, raw and unpolished, the kind you feel in your chest, not your ears. Later that evening, as golden light spilled over the valley, Silas brought 2 mugs of ginger tea to the porch. Janelle took one, her hands soft now, not from lack of work, but from work done freely, no longer under someone else's chains. They sat side by side, watching Malik chase Grace across the dirt path, both of them laughing like bells. Janelle turned to Silas. You ever think we'd have this? She asked. Silas stared ahead, his voice steady. No. But I never stopped hoping. She reached over and gently rested her hand on his. He didn't squeeze. He didn't need to. Just being there, that was the vow. In the field, the children of Sunrise Ranch began their final activity of the day. Each one held a small folded piece of paper, a life story written in their own words. They called them, the lines of the forgotten. One by one, they stepped up to a stump in the field, stood tall, and read aloud. I was told I was slow, but Miss Janelle told me I was thoughtful. I thought I was just a girl from the trailer park, but here I'm a reader, a writer, and someone who knows her worth. My mom cleaned houses. Now I write poems about her hands. There was no perfection. There were stutters, missed words, trembling hands. But no shame. Because they were seen. Under a tall shade tree, Grace finished writing her sentence in a white notebook. My family is the people who never left. She looked up, saw her mother, and ran across the field. Janelle opened her arms and caught her mid-laugh, spinning her around as dusk fell like a curtain. Silas rose from his chair, walking toward them, and they stood there, no bloodlines, no legacy names, just people who had chosen to stay when it would have been easier to walk away. And behind them, carved into the wooden arch above the classroom entrance, were words Malik had painted weeks ago. This house was built from those the world discarded. The wind blew gently. The stars emerged. And in that little corner of the American West, where once a mother and son were left to die in the dust, the light had finally found its home. Some stories are not about grand battles, but about quiet survival. About staying. About choosing love when every door slams shut. Janelle Carter didn't fight to prove herself. She fought because no one else would. Her story is the story of many, those abandoned, mislabeled, dismissed. And yet, she didn't respond with hate. She responded with presence. Your story doesn't end where others stop believing in you. If you've ever felt forgotten, or if you've ever stood silently beside someone who was, this story was for you. Subscribe to True Echo for more real stories that reveal the power of resilience, compassion, and truth. Leave a comment if you've ever faced injustice. Share this with someone who needs to know, they're not alone. Because when you share the light, it never fades.